Would you like to learn how to make homemade chicken vindaloo? Stay tuned for the next episode of Hilltop Stovetop. Hello and welcome back to Hilltop Stovetop, the show where we're teaching you how to make great meals in an ordinary kitchen. Today we're going to be making chicken vindaloo. And so for those of you that like a little spice in your life, this is the dish for you. We're going to be using the Instant Pot, so it will be quite relatively quick to make it. But if you prefer, you can use a slow cooker. So we're going to start off with about a cup of onions and 5 cloves of garlic chopped up, and some minced ginger. So this would be the equivalent of about 3 slices if you had a whole ginger root, but I had some that was already pre-chopped. And then about a tablespoon of oil. Just about out on this bottle. And we're going to mix that up together. And we're going to start off, we're just going to cook these up in the microwave. If you prefer, you can do them up in the frying pan. Point is that we want to have these cooked until they're starting to brown a little bit. So it says about 5 minutes in the microwave, so we'll see in about 5 minutes. Okay, so we are back after 5 minutes, and just as promised, even in the microwave, those vegetables were starting to brown up a little bit. So we're going to take those and we're going to put them into the blender, and now adding in all the rest of the vegetables to finish making this sauce. And one thing about making the sauce yourself, you can kind of control how hot you're going to make it. So we've got ginger, garlic, oil. We're going to add in the 1/4 cup of vinegar and about a cup of diced tomatoes. Now you could use canned tomatoes, but I happen to have some tomatoes that were kind of starting to get a little overripe, so I'm using those up. We've got a teaspoon of kosher salt, and those of you who watched my video on making corned beef know the differences in the salt. We have a teaspoon of Garam Masala. We have a teaspoon of smoked paprika. I'm only using half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Now, I'm a bit of a wuss when it comes to the spicy foods. You can use as much as 2 teaspoons in this if you like your food really spicy. I'm just going to use a half a teaspoon just to give it a little bit of heat. Actually, it's going to be a fair bit of heat in my mind anyway. Half a teaspoon of ground coriander and half a teaspoon of ground cumin. Now we are going to add in some turmeric at the end, but you don't put it in there before because turmeric will stain things. Now in my case, my blender is a glass container, so that's less of an issue. But if you had a plastic container that you were blending this in, the turmeric would stain it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to blend all of this together. So let's make some noise here. We've got about a pound of chicken here. Could be chicken thighs. This is chicken breasts. One way or another, it should be boneless chicken. And then we're going to take 1/4 cup of water and add that back in here just to help us clean out our blender, and at the same time add a little bit more moisture to this marinade. And then we're going to add in a half a teaspoon of turmeric. We're going to take all of this and mix it all together. Now you'll notice it is quite liquidy, but that's okay. We have a plan here. Okay, so at this point, you're pretty much done other than letting this marinade for at least 30 minutes, but it could be up to as much as 8 hours. So if you wanted to set this to marinade before you went to work in the morning, and then you'd have dinner ready when you're in the Instant Pot relatively quickly. But if you just wanted to marinate it for 30 minutes and then put it all in your slow cooker for 5 or 6 hours, that's an option too. So we're going to let this sit for about, well, minimum 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer depending on what I get busy doing. And we'll see you when it's time to start cooking. And by the way, before we go, we should know, where does the term Vindaloo come from? And I found this kind of interesting. Vindaloo comes from Portugal. So the story goes that there was Portuguese soldiers who needed to preserve meat in the warm climates of India, and they used wine or wine vinegar. So we've used vinegar here, garlic and chilies as a preservative. And so their name for that was carne de Vindaloo. My Portuguese isn't very good, so carne de Vindaloo, and that's been distorted into being Vindaloo. So that's where the name from this comes from. So it's very spicy, very vinegary, and it's going to be delicious. So we'll see you in a little while after this is marinated. All right, so we're back. It's been a little over half an hour, which is just the bare minimum for this, but I can't wait to test it out. So we're going to go ahead. We've got our Instant Pot ready to go, and we're just going to pour this in. Then, normally with something like Chicken Vindaloo, you've got a choice of what you're going to serve it with. It might be with rice, or with naan bread, or with potatoes. Now today I'm choosing to go with potatoes because when this is finished cooking, if it's a little bit on the thin side, we'll take the chicken out and we'll reduce the sauce so it's a little thicker. But an alternative way to do that would be to puree a bit of potatoes and put that into the sauce to thicken it up. You don't want to be using cornstarch and stuff. I mean, that's just not going to go with this, but some pureed potatoes would. So by cooking up some potatoes, we're going to be we can either serve this over the potatoes or we can incorporate the potatoes into the sauce. So I've got a bunch of potatoes here that I've just cut up into little cubes. I'm going to pour the majority of the water off because when we're cooking them in the Instant Pot, we don't need a lot of water. I'm just going to leave just the bare minimum in there. And then I've got a piece of aluminum foil that I'm just putting in, kind of making a little sling with it, so that I can lower this down on top. So we're going to be cooking with 2 layers. And why did that camera go off? So we're going to be cooking with 2 layers, and we're just going to pop that in and put the lid on, and we're going to cook it for 5 minutes. So we will 5 minutes plus 10 minutes of release time. So we will see you. It'll be about 20-25 minutes by the time this is all said and done. All right, so we're back. We've cooked this under high pressure for 5 minutes and then let it continue on for another 10. So the pressure is totally released now, and we're going to open it up. Ooh, gooey good. Okay, so this looks pretty good so far. Let's see if our potatoes are done. Our potatoes are just done, I would say. Yeah, they're done. Okay, so now we're going to reach in. This will be hot. And there we can just lift out the potatoes and set them off to the side for the moment. And as you can see, the sauce is quite liquidy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my strainer, and lift out the chicken. And like I said, we could mash up some of those potatoes and use them to thicken the sauce a little bit. But I think if we can do this for our keto friends that wouldn't want to have any of that, that would be more likely to use some kind of vegetable with this instead of potatoes. We'll put this on. We're going to put it on the saute mode, which is basically like a hot plate. It's going to be boiling, and we're going to reduce that until it thickens a little bit. You can see how it's quite, it's quite liquidy, quite watery. So that'll give everything else a chance to breathe a little bit while this is thickening up, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so we are back, and by just letting this simmer for maybe even 5 minutes, that sauce is thickened up considerably. So now we can put the chicken back in, and I must admit I did sneak a little taste while this was simmering, and it is awesome. It's relatively mild. Like I said, I didn't put in, I put in the bare minimum of cayenne because I am a little bit of a wuss when it comes to this stuff. But it still has some heat to it, so that's what everybody's looking for, I'm sure. And so we're going to take some of our potatoes here. And then some of our beautiful chicken. And of course the sauce that goes with it. And there we have it, Chicken Vindaloo. Vinegar and spices, direct from the Portuguese. So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode of Hilltop Stovetop, where we've made chicken vindaloo. Just keep in mind that if you don't like chicken, you can also make this with pork or with lamb. And I'm sure those vegetarians among you would figure out a way to do it with some plant-based kind of thing. But the sauce is awesome and as good as going out to a restaurant, maybe even better. So we'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.